because of her situation in the book, she needs to get away. And she's always wanted to go to college. So she then goes to college and then she meets Dr. Death. She has money issues and does some things,
Oh,
which was one of my favorite scenes.
spice right there. I feel
It was one of my favorite scenes. I will tease it a little bit by saying it's filming yourself, but in a public place. Welcome to Morally Gray Babes. We're your hosts, Jen and Amber, two unapologetic book addicts diving deep into the steamiest dreams, hottest book boyfriends, and those spicy moments that make you blush.
Amber here. And we're not just here to talk plot twists and character arcs. We're breaking down everything from our favorite quotes to the spice levels that really bring the heat.
Expect a lot of laughs, a little cussing, and some seriously hot takes. Whether we're gushing over fictional men or dishing out the truth on what books deserve the hype, nothing is off limits.
So buckle up, Buttercup, and get ready for real, raw, and totally unfiltered book talk. Because we're the book besties you didn't know you needed. Hey there, Jen and Amber back again as we dive into our next Morally Gray book. This one is called Nocticadia. It's by Keri Lake, and the female and male characters are Lilia and Deverick Bradenwell, aka Dr. Death. It's a dark academia which focuses on plot more than spice. However, you have an obsessed professor and definitely some heated scenes to keep you turning the pages. Now, before we dive into this, I'm gonna let you know why I, Amber, picked this book. And it was basically because I stumbled across this, once again, bookstagrammer who shared that this was going to be like a dark, twisted Harry Potter, like dark, twisted Hogwarts vibe for adults. And I was like, speak no more. That is perfection. And thankfully, Jen thought so as well. So, Jen, how about you give us like a little synopsis of the book?
I think I might be prepared to say was, an Audible listener. So I would always listen to Audible books because I could speed through them, still enjoying the story. My opinions will be a little bit less than they will be in the rest of the episodes because I think I'm feeling comfortable saying was an Audible listener because I like to listen while I do all the things. But now I like to be able to highlight in Kindle. I like to be able to dog ear the pages. So, anyway, I will have a little bit less information in this episode, and I wanted to let everybody know why. But the synopsis, it's a dark, atmospheric tale of deadly secrets and forbidden love. Mortui vivos docent, the dead teach the living. After watching my mother succumb to a mysterious illness, I promised myself two things. I'd find the cure that ravaged her and leave this godforsaken city where she abandoned me. 4 years later, I received an acceptance letter from Nocticadia University, one of the oldest, most prestigious schools in the country. Nestled on a secluded island off the coast of Maine, it's rumored to be haunted by the souls of the mental patients exiled there centuries before, those whose bones are said to make up the island's white sandy shores.
So apparently, it's up to me to discuss the trigger warnings. So if any of these topics might cause distress or affect your enjoyment of the story, please bypass this podcast episode, bypass this book. Your mental health, your well being is so important. These trigger warnings can be found in the beginning of the book, but we're just going to share them because we're going to be talking about some of these things in this episode. And they include strong language, explicit sexual situations, murder, graphic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, suicide, choking, hallucinations, secret society, rituals, torture, detailed description of autopsies, grotesque scenes involving parasites. Oh my gosh, this book, I loved it. And I'm going to share with you why first. I love the medical jargon within this book. If people don't know, I have a medical background. I'm an emergency critical care veterinarian with a passion to read. So they were like in this book, they're talking about this parasite. So they're studying parasitology and the effects that a particular species has with humans. And I just found it so fascinating. There was one or two things that medically did not line up for me, and I was, like, very annoyed. I read this book, and I think that should be something we tell the listeners is, like, the style in which we read. Like, you listen to this on audio, I read it in paperback, right?
Yeah.
So, some of the names, I don't know if you do this, but whenever you read, like, a hardback or a Kindle, I make up the names, right? Like,
Yes, you make them up. You pronounce them the way that it makes sense in your brain, and then you hear them somewhere else, and it's a problem.
yes, because you kept
Yeah.
saying Lilia, and I was like, "She's just Lily in my head." Like,
Yeah, exactly.
and his name is Deverick, but in my head, it's just Doctor Death the whole entire time. So I would say that I read this. I was highlighting and putting tabs in this book because I was just obsessed, one, with the male main character. I loved his backstory. I loved his trauma. I loved as a female main character how she was like, how she just fought so aggressively, right? She was determined to fight for a different life.
I mean, she was down and out multiple
Yes,
times,
she's
and she just kept coming back. I love warriors
yes.
like that. We've talked like that in the past on
And she was
episodes.
fighting for this life, not just for herself, but also for her younger sibling. And for some odd reason, I also love when the main characters text one another and it pops up like you're reading it in real time, like these messages. I don't know what it is. I loved it. It was in this book, not the whole time. But
No, it wasn't confusing. Some books, it's, like, way confusing. This was perfect, added little extra stuff.
exactly. So I love the medical jargon. Like I said, there was one or two things that I think I was like cursing at Jen about on Voxer. Like, this does not happen in people. Like, this is specifically just in animals. I would just go crazy. But I loved it. So some of the tropes in here, we talk about professor and student dynamic. It's a dark academia. Like I said, think twisted Hogwarts for 20-year-olds. So like your female main character is not 16. Thank you, Jesus. And I will say it's a tidbit on the gore side at times, but it's ghost
Mhm.
humor. So you get grossed out, but by the time, like, you're like, "Oh, about to gag," it turns funny, and I was like,
Truly, because I'm not a medical girly. I don't like medical things. I like legal stuff. If the medical thing, so I was iffy going into this, but it wasn't more gore than like a scary movie that you watch, right? Like it was not. I was scared. I didn't want to read it at night, and yet I ended up reading it at night or listening, I should say, which to me is scarier. But it was fine. So I don't want to scare someone
yeah,
off.
well, and I don't like things that deal with humans, right? I do animal
Oh,
medicine, like veterinary medicine,
sure.
so when people talk about
Yeah, autopsy stuff. Bleh. Like it, I
autopsy
didn't like.
was gross, but then it got funny. Like, there was humor in it, and it's like, "That's hilarious and gross." And it just made it to where it was more readable, and I liked that, and I
Sure.
didn't know that I would like it. And also, there's, like, a secret society. I mean, how can you not love
I mean,
society?
yeah, yeah. I will say I loved the mystery of it and the medical side. Like it was a book that had medical in it that I didn't hate. I kept listening, right? Kept reading, and I got through the book really fast. But some of the medical stuff I couldn't read as fast. And so that part made me a little frustrated. Obviously, not the book's fault, just me. And I think to me, that ending, like, the last 4 or 5 chapters was a bit confusing to me.
So, maybe we should tell how about you give us, like, a I know you gave the synopsis, but just give us, like, a very cliff notes of, like, the book
Yeah.
without getting away the
So
end.
yeah, it was like 3 separate books almost. It was kinda weird. So the beginning was her dealing with her mother dying from these parasites when everyone's telling her like, making her feel like that's not true. They even
Everybody's
do an
yeah.
autopsy and stuff like that, but they're making her doubt herself, like, the whole time. Then she ends up getting a mysterious free education ride at this college, and she really has because of her situation in the book, like, I don't wanna give it all away, but because of her situation in the book, she needs to get away, and she's always wanted to go to college. So she then goes to college, and then she meets Doctor Death. She has money issues and does some things,
Oh,
which was one of my favorite scenes.
spice right
Yeah.
there. I feel
It was one of my favorite scenes. I will tease it a little bit by saying it's filming yourself, but in a public place.
Yes.
right? That doesn't exactly give it away, but
Well,
always for being able to take care of her sister and pay for her sister's school. So this is a female character who constantly has money issues.
yes.
Like it's ingrained in her, and yet she still pushes forward and still does all these things. And then toward the end, it has this whole secret society thing.
I
And
would say
the epilogue
the secret.
was like arguing. I was arguing with it. I did not.
So I will say that she goes to this university, right? She earns a spot at this university, and her main goal is to study parasitology so she can
Yes.
understand exactly what happened to her mother. And that's how she gets in line with Dr. Death. And then he just becomes completely obsessed. And we all know I love an obsessed milk character. And
Who doesn't? I mean, not me. I'm with you on that.
everything. So, he gets completely obsessed and tries to, like, push her away, but he keeps, like, a moth to the flame, and I wanna say that is her nickname that he gives her. Moth, right? It's like certain moth. Oh my gosh, it's like I'm blanking now.
See? Audio. I couldn't even look it up if I wanted to.
But it's like curious moth or something like that, and so he's, like, just constantly
Little Boss?
hers. I don't know, I'm gonna have to look it up. He's constantly drawn to her, and at the same time, he does questionable things to, like, in the in
In a lot of
science.
areas.
In, like in the pursuit of science, like, he's trying to get answers, he wants to figure out what is happening. It's this mysterious island with this weird history, and she just wants answers herself for her mother, but she is staying a little bit quiet about that because she doesn't wanna get in trouble. The thing I loved about this book, and we're not gonna talk about the ending, I know it frustrated Jen, and I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
agree, think it was a little bit rushed, but one of the things I loved about the book was that there always seemed to be layers to this story. Like, we talk
Yes.
about the girl goes to school, the girl learns this. Doctor Death, they have, like, their own little side story, but Doctor Death has his story, and then you had these other side characters that had their story, and I loved it.
It was really smart writing.
It was.
Really smart
I
writing.
felt like the last, I don't know, 5 to 8 chapters were just
Reveal, reveal, reveal.
and I was like, I feel like
Yeah.
make it more drawn out, and then the epilogue just pissed me the fuck off. We're just gonna say it like that.
I almost wish it wasn't even in the book because then I would have rated the book higher. I
That
know.
was the one thing I did not like was that because it did not make sense in my brain. Like, I could see it coming, like, you could.
I couldn't connect the dots, and between both of us not being able to connect the dots when we read a lot says to me that it felt
Well, it
rushed or I don't
the
know.
reason is because, like, that well, I don't wanna give it away, but, like, person's backstory doesn't fit. It didn't fit, and I, like the timeline doesn't match up, and then, like, you can see how, like, why it was put there in this, like, because I was like, "Oh, this could probably be another book for it," and yes, I would probably read it, but it didn't match the timeline that was given to that character's backstory. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, so let's get to ratings.
Wait,
Let's talk
I have a
about
quote.
oh, I know. See, I don't have a quote because I listened to it on Audible. So
Well,
yes, please share your
I
quotes with
have 3 quotes that I just loved, and while I was writing my notes for this, I was, like, blushing, and I was sending Jen my notes, like, on Boxer, and I was like, I forgot how much I loved his black obsession with her, like, he's just darkly obsessed, and I love it.
Ruth.
So, here we go. These all 3 are from Dr. Death. It says and I'm gonna just say every single word that he said.
Yes,
Now,
say
one
every
of these
single word.
words makes Jen cringe, so she's just gonna
It's okay. I'll live. I'll live.
you're living because I'm saying it, not you. It
Correct.
says, "I don't give a damn about every other girl. There's only one who crosses my mind a fuck ton more than she
Or
should. So I'm going to finish you, Lilia. I'm going to give you the release you've been craving, and I won't touch you again. But this pussy belongs to me. You let any other undeserving prick near it, and I will cut his tongue and send
no.
it to you in a specimen jar."
Yes. Real one. That would be
Oh my god, red flag. I'm like, red flag listening to this if this was real life. It was
always
different.
I always feel like I shouldn't be liking it. But that's the whole point of dark romance novels
Fiction,
is
yeah.
to just live in your little brain.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you're not gonna go out and, like, what, ride a dragon, right? Like, this is
True. Very
consistency.
true.
So, here's another one. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Whew. I'm getting blushy just thinking about it. I can assure you, this isn't going to last a minute and a half. I'm not some adolescent boy who comes the moment his dick gets wet. I'm a man who fucks hard and thoroughly enjoys the torment of delayed gratification. You're gonna be sore, and I really fucking hope you want this, Lilia, because you're gonna hate me when it's over. Oh, like, hey, like, what?
I'm
I'm blushing, I remember, I'm like, like,
Woo!
it's like, I'm like, I'm a man who, like, I'm like, "Yeah, you are. Go, Doctor Death." I feel like I need a shirt that says Doctor Death. Death gets me. Okay, here's the last one. Again, it's gonna be like the first quote, but it just shows how obsessed he is with her. Like, he keeps pushing
Yes.
her away. He has to have her, and then he pushes her
Oh,
away,
yeah.
and then he has
Love
to
those
have her,
books.
and I'm like, I love the torment that this man faces. So, let me get my Doctor Death voice. I don't think I'll be able to stay away from you after this, but let me be very clear. He gritted through his clenched teeth as his hand gripped my throat. I don't share. If anyone else so much as looks at this pussy, I'll take pleasure in dissecting him, starting with his eyeballs. I'm like, okay, I know it's healthy. I said it. So, like, Professor Deverick Brimwell, yes, please. So, Keri Lake made a very good, obsessed, morally black character, and I'm all for it. That's my thought. So, with the quotes, Jen, how would you rate the spice level? We all know what our baseline is, right? So, 1 through 5, what do you feel?
2, 3, 2,
2,
3.
3?
I'm waffling between the 2. Definitely not a 4 or 5 for sure. Not with the book I'm reading now.
Again, our scale has got skewed the more that we read. I would say, like, there's some voyeurism in there, right? There's some filming, there's some delayed gratification. I would agree. It's like I was gonna say 2.5. Like, it's not quite like
Exactly right. Like, I would say I totally think it's a 2 for our scale. It might be a 3 for some people who are not reading reverse harems.
I would say like a 2, 2.5.
Yep.
And it
And
wasn't like some of the books that we read, there's like I would say it's like a dark, spicy 2 and 3. Like, this was not. Like, I think this was like just like a 2.5 spice level. So,
yeah,
yeah,
agreed.
I agree.
And so let's do our ratings because I'm always super hard. So I like to let Amber go first.
You're super hard? What?
No, I meant
Oh, I
you, Amber, are super like almost no one's getting a 5.
there it's well, I don't wanna say like that.
How many 5s do you read in a year, do you think?
This year, I haven't read one. As of today, I read 225 books this year. I've not read a 5. 5 to me means I think about it daily, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's constantly on
Yeah.
my mind in some way. Maybe I'm like, "Oh, I bet the female main character would do this," or like, or
Yes, yes,
or
yes,
just
yeah,
like
or you see something, you're like, "Oh, I remember that in the book."
yeah, like
Yeah.
little moments that obviously it's kinda like your Roman Empire, right? I feel like those should be the 5s. I would
Yeah.
recommend, but only
Well,
to people that I know would love it as much as me. So,
yeah, I think I've read 6 5s since February. So, yeah, so I am more lenient,
yeah,
that's
and
all.
I also don't give halves or quarters or 3
No, we're
quarters.
not doing that.
Yeah,
And I have a hard time sometimes, but we're not doing that.
yeah, so 4 means I really loved the book and I would recommend it.
3 means it was an enjoyable read, but it's not gonna be one of the first books you talk about to somebody.
3 means, yeah, I mean, I like it, but, I probably won't recommend it. And if people
Yeah,
say, "Oh, do you like this book?" I'm like, "Yeah, I like it," but I won't say anything else. I won't dive into it. I
yeah,
probably even forgot it. And that's not a bad thing. It's just I it really bothers me when we have these scales, and I know it helps other
no,
people read, but there's
I
so many things around it, like our mood, what I was feeling. Do I relate to the characters? Like, I love
If we're sick and forget reading a whole book. Yeah, those
yeah,
points
I
of view.
know, that's so bad, and the book is so good. But this book, I loved it. I love the medical jargon. I love the parasitology. I love the gore with the dark humor. I love Doctor Death and his filthy mouth. Like, I loved how obsessed he was. It's a 4. It's a solid 4 for me. I love the book
Okay.
and would recommend.
So I rated it a 4 when I read it. I love the book. Don't get me
I did
wrong.
not like the very end.
But upon reflection, since we read this book a little bit ago, I really think I would give it a 3.
Oh,
Just because I have found other books that I like way more, like, it's just pushing it down the list a little bit. And medical is not my total favorite, but I enjoy reading it. I absolutely loved the mystery in here. So, I'm gonna give it a 4 because that's what I originally gave it, but I feel like the more books I read, the more I'm gonna become like you.
harder, tougher than scale. Mhm.
Yeah,
The
I
less
think so.
lives you're gonna give. You're welcome.
Yeah, and let's be honest, on this podcast and our YouTube channel, we are not sharing ones and twos.
No, it's
We're
not
just
fair.
gonna put it out there. Yeah, and we're only gonna share a 3 if I wanna share it, because I don't think you would share a 3 normally.
No, it wouldn't cross my mind to share it.
Yeah, so the only reason why we'll share a 3 on this is because I completely disagree with her, which is passable, although we are very similar in our
Are.
book life.
Yeah, so with this book, it's a solid 4 for me. It's a barely 4 for Jen. The story is great. Dark academia, professor, student, obsessive male main character, multiple layers within the story.
Very well written,
Like
smart, I
certain
really
like
am
side
good at.
characters came into play that you may or may not have seen coming. I love that. The very end I felt was a little bit rushed just for my taste.
Mhm.
And the epilogue, like I said, I'm not happy with, but that's okay.
Girl, read the epilogue. No, I'm just kidding. Do whatever you want. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in, babes. If you loved hanging out with us today as much as we loved hanging out with you, don't forget to check the show notes for all the juicy details and the links. You can also join our broadcast channel for exclusive updates and behind the scenes goodies. In fact, when we start sharing video, it will be shared in that specific broadcast channel.
So, of course, follow us for more spicy reads, hot takes, and unfiltered fun. And until next time, stay morally great.